First, a number of MPs are expected to table amendments in the House of Commons tomorrow that would effectively rule out a no-deal Brexit. But others believe that no deal is no big deal. And one of them is the former Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab. He joins us now from central London. It feels as if Parliament is really trying to take back control of the Brexit process. What do you make of the amendments that are apparently being about to be laid down on suspending Article 50 and also trying to block no deal?
Well, Parliament has already taken control in one sense. We've triggered Article 50, that's why we've been in these negotiations, and it's set in law that we will leave the EU on the 29th of March. It's certainly true that it would require legislation to reverse that position, but that would almost certainly require the support, or at least the acquiescence of the government. And the Prime Minister has been very clear on this. It's not quite true to say I support no deal. I would like to see us go back to Brussels, look at the two crucial changes I've always argued for on the backstop, a transition to a best-in-class free trade agreement, and I think there's still a possibility that this deal could pass. But I think the British public want this done and dusted, and therefore we are leaving on the 29th of March. That's set in law, and I think it's unlikely to be reversed. Perhaps the one helpful thing I think the Prime Minister could do is rule out extending Article 50. People need some closure, some finality. Let's get this done and move on.
At the same time, though, it feels as if there's a movement in Westminster to try and rule out no deal entirely. What do you think the consequences of that would be?
Well, look, I think it's very difficult to do. We've seen some of the shenanigans over the weekend, an attempt to try and allow a super minority, so less than half of MPs, to set the agenda in Parliament. I think that would be an extraordinary and undemocratic thing to do. I think as a reality check on this, it's very difficult to do some of these colourful ideas that have been floated around. And of course, on the Remain side, they're split. You've got Dominic Raab arguing in the Sunday Times that the Norway option is a very poor deal and he doesn't support that. And equally, I think there's much less support than is perhaps magnified in the media for a second referendum. That would just create even more uncertainty. We'd be back at square one. I don't think that's what people want, whether they voted Leave or Remain. And the Comres poll in January showed very clearly that by 2 to 1, people want this referendum respected. And I think whether people voted Leave or Remain, they want now this done. They want us to move on, talk about the economy, public services. We won't be able to do that until we deliver Brexit. So that's what we should all focus on.
I mean, Liam Fox, for example, has said that if the result of the referendum isn't delivered on, it will unleash a political tsunami. Do you think he's right?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat it, please?
Liam Fox has written today saying that failing to deliver on the referendum would unleash a political tsunami. Do you think that's right?
I always try and choose my language very carefully, but I think that if there's an attempt to reverse the referendum, stop Brexit altogether, I think that will cut across not only the democratic mandate, the biggest in history we had, I think also, if you look at current public opinion and how it's shifted, by 2 to 1, as I said, people want us to respect the referendum. I think people understand that's basically a fundamental principle of the democracy that we've got. And I don't want to leave on WTO terms. I'd rather we got a deal. But I don't think we can let the EU hold us hostage and just stubbornly resist all reasonable changes. So I think the Prime Minister's right to send the negotiators back to Brussels. I think actually one thing we should do now, rule out extending Article 50, give us some finality. I think the team in Brussels needs to change. Don't think for all the great work the civil servants have done, I think to close this deal needs to be politically led and driven, so taken into the control of the politicians, because this is a deal that needs to be closed now. But I think we should give it our best shot, and if not, we're leaving on the 29th of March and we'll make the best of it, and people will then be able to move on. We'll have the certainty, we'll be able to manage the risk, but also be able to grasp the huge opportunities of Brexit and get on to talking about other things.
You see, you say that you would prefer to leave with a deal, but at the same time, you've been pretty scathing about the Prime Minister's deal. You're asking for something that the EU is extremely unlikely to budge on, which is the removal of the backstop. The reality is, isn't it, that by not supporting the Prime Minister's deal, you're effectively allowing other MPs to try and soften Brexit and potentially even stop Brexit altogether.
That sounds like the spin the whips were putting round before the vote, but the reality is this is the biggest defeat on any vote in parliamentary history. So obviously the deal needs to be changed if it's going to get through. And we should go back in good faith and keep the arm of friendship extended with our EU partners and neighbours. And I think there is still an opportunity. Michel Barnier, Donald Tusk have said we need to know now what the Brits need, what they want, so let's set that out. But of course, if they're basically saying no, that they will not accept any changes which would resolve the fatal flaws in the deal that was put to Parliament, then we would leave on WTO terms, at least as a transition. I think as an independent third country, we'd actually return to the negotiations reasonably swiftly and have stronger negotiating leverage. What we can't allow is either the EU to bully us or for them to call all the shots.
I mean, one of the things that you've been pretty consistent in your criticism of is the backstop. It's a big deal for Brexiteers like yourself, also the DUP. Arlene Foster have said this week, I don't think the Prime Minister even asked to get rid of the backstop. Now, you were Brexit Secretary during that part of the negotiation, so did you or the Prime Minister ask to get rid of the backstop?
Well, as you know from when I resigned, I had been struggling to persuade the Prime Minister that we would need an exit mechanism, but the right thing to do was have that debate in Cabinet for 5 hours. I set out my views very clearly. I've made it clear since July that there was an opportunity to address this issue and that it would be necessary to put a good deal to the country, but also, from a practical matter, to get it through Parliament.
So did you ask the EU? I'm not saying I
told you so.
Did you ask the EU?
Excuse me?
Did you ask the EU?
Oh, of course, I raised it in July with Michel Barnier, who accepted then that the backstop would have to be short. But unfortunately, I think after that we didn't follow up, and I argued very strongly that we should do, and we should have been resolute on this point. And look, it's late in the day now, but we should go back and have that argument and make it clear now, because I think there is some focusing of EU minds. I'm not sure it'll be enough to get the changes we need, but there is some focusing on EU minds about the consequences for leaving with on WTO terms for them. It's not the optimum solution. The optimum solution is a deal. What we can't allow is for them to blackmail us into a bad deal.
So you talked about some of the consequences of leaving on WTO terms. I mean, you said that no deal would have some short-term risks. I mean, what are those risks? Can you spell it out? Because people are worried.
Well, there's a range of risks, and I set it out over the summer with a speech. There's the risk, of course, that we would have friction at the border. In fairness, the French authorities, including the Deputy Mayor of Calais, has reacted very robustly in saying, no, we're going to keep the trade flowing because we don't want to lose that vital business to the Belgian ports and the Dutch ports. There are also issues, and we already have them. There's an issue in the media at the moment about the insecurity of supply of medicines, but Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, has said that he's got the preparations and the plans in place. And of course, put Brexit aside, we already have stockpiling for hundreds of medicines each year because of the risk to the supply route. So I think there are some short-term risks for, say, 3 to 6 months, but they're manageable. The advantage, of course, if we did end up leaving on WTO terms, and I've said that's not my preferred outcome, is we'd immediately seize the opportunities to take back control over our laws, our borders, to have an independent free trade, global free trade policy around the world. And I think for the public, Brexit would be delivered. We could move on. And I think whether you voted Leave or Remain, I think there's a huge appetite for us to get on and deliver this now.
Now, you gave a pretty wide-ranging speech this week, didn't you? You touched on lots of subjects, Brexit, of course, improving competition, energy markets, tax rates, shareholder power. I mean, if it looks like a leadership pitch and it smells like a leadership pitch, it is a leadership pitch, right?
No, what I'm trying to do is, for me, I think you're right to raise the issue of risk, but we talk so much about, with doom and gloom, about the risks and the downside of Brexit. We've lost the vision, we've lost the optimism, the hope that fired up 17 million people plus to vote for the biggest democratic mandate in our history. And what I wanted to set out is who a positive, optimistic post-Brexit vision for the UK is for. It's for the consumers who get cheaper prices. It's for the workers because of the growth markets of the future from Latin America to Asia. And I also said that we should take some domestic decisions like cutting national insurance for workers on the lowest and middle incomes. And I think if we had a positive vision for Brexit, not just taking it as some kind of accountant's risk management exercise, I think actually people would have more confidence that there's some direction to where we're headed.
OK, definitely not a leadership pitch there, no. That's come through loud and clear. Do you think Theresa May will still be Prime Minister next Christmas?
Look, I don't know what's going to happen. I want to support this Prime Minister getting Brexit over the line. I think we've got a massive decision ahead of us, and I think your viewers would think it was self-indulgent for anyone to be focusing on any of that stuff now. I think we've got limited time, so let's put ourselves in the best position, both in terms of a negotiated deal, but also if the EU resist all reasonable offers, the WTO transition. If we do that, we'll be in a good place, and we can worry about all the rest of that stuff after that.
You're certainly, I don't think anyone would argue with you that we've got limited time left. One MP has said to me this week that there is the potential for a deal to be done, but Theresa May is possibly the worst person to try and get that deal done. Do you think she has got the skills to be able to bring enough MPs together to get behind her Brexit deal?
I do think the government as a whole, and the Prime Minister must be part of that, needs to listen more. We've walked in, or the government's walked into the biggest parliamentary defeat in history, and it was something that wasn't just predictable, it was predicted. I gave that advice, it was given by others inside the Cabinet and amongst the ranks of MPs. But it's all very easy to crow. It's a difficult situation. The people have different views on all sides. I think the best thing now is to keep it relatively simple. The legislation is there, so we will leave on the 29th of March unless it's reversed, and that can't be done without the Prime Minister's decision. So I think she's got to go back, and I think actually this defeat puts her in a position to go back to Brussels and say, look, Parliament is not going to accept this deal. We're asking for two changes. They're reasonably straightforward. Other people will ask for more, but I think these two changes would get the deal through. And if you don't want that, then you need to recognise your part in the UK leaving without a deal with you and on WTO terms. This deal is still salvageable, and I think come what may, we'll make a success of Brexit. But we do need a bit of vision, a bit of optimism, and we need to be absolutely resolute from here on in with our EU partners.